Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Belle again. So today, we're going to talk about TikTok, World War III, and harnessing the correction. I got a question from a teacher that I think might be useful for people trying to not only promote critical thinking, which is what the question is about, but also those trying to combat sensationalism. Here's the question. I am a public high school teacher in redacted name of community. I teach in one of the poorest zip codes in the country. I am just finishing up my 17th year at my school, and I love my job. I encourage my students to be curious, to question everything, even me. As I observe them navigating a world that virtually discourages the empowerment of critical thinking, I strive to cultivate a sense of wonder and inquiry. They so often come into class with half-heard truths they heard on TikTok or Instagram. So much of what I do is pushing them to, at the very least, vet sources. So this all leads to my question. What should I tell my students when they ask me if we're about to enter World War III? I want to validate their concerns, while at the same time encouraging calm, measured evaluation. Harness the power of correction. Another byproduct of a society that is populated by people who are more often getting their validation via social media is the desire to not be corrected by their peers and the desire to correct others. Specifically with the idea of World War III, there's a couple of things. First, their worry probably isn't a concern about a world war exactly. Their concern is war in general, and specifically a large war. But we'll come back to that in a minute. You want to validate their concerns. Makes sense. Is there a risk of war? It's the United States. Of course there is. We're a country that, depending on how you count, has been at war about 75 to 90% of our existence. It might be helpful to remind them of that, and then explain what percentage of their life the U.S. has had troops in conflict zones. So, it's easy to validate their concerns about war and the risk of war. But it's the World War aspect that puts that extra element of fear in it. Ask them to define World War. Then ask them if the current war or rumor of war would actually fit that definition. Most times it won't. The other thing that is common in the fear that's provoked by the phrase World War III is masses of troops being needed, and therefore a massive draft. It might be good to ask them to game out if masses of troops, the way they're picturing, are even a thing anymore. Or has that type of fighting become mostly obsolete due to advancements in firepower and automation? The risk of war is real. It always is, because we live in a world based on competition instead of cooperation. But teaching them that rhetoric being used to instill deeper panic-inducing fear is just clickbait. Might be a good jumping off point for a conversation about sensationalist claims and evaluating sources. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.